Hi, and let's crack on with my review of day two of Tectonics Glasgow 2024. So the day opened with Brian Irvine and the Imaginary Orchestra in the Old Fruit Market. And this was a very different kind of disorder from the Mark Yates composed piece yesterday, but it was just as compelling. It was a group of musicians uh, brought together and organized just a short time before performing, only a few hours to rehearse. A group with a range of ages, a range of instruments, and with a range of abilities. And the sounds produced ranged from fragile to overwhelming, from beautiful to ominous. And the methodology to put them together, I imagine, is not a million miles away from Phil Minton's Feral Choir, or perhaps even more so Anthony Donovan's Murmurists events. There were in this at the opening and then later on toward the end elements of physical performance to it. At one point, even involving some of the audience. There were silences, there was sound of voices, speaking and singing. There was structure and chants. There was a section where some of the ensemble were given the task of conducting different parts of the orchestra, and all of it opened up these questions around authorship, around authority, and about access to music and performance, and who has the right to call themselves a musician or involved in this world. Um, and it was a definite highlight for me, and really all of my highlights um, on this day are very much front loaded, which is probably not really a reflection on the music or the event. It's uh, the fact that I put myself under a lot of pressure to uh, write things while I'm also watching this. Um, that I go into the first day quite hard. And also on this occasion, I'm a long distance out. I'm about an hour and a half away from the where I'm staying, about an hour and a half away from the city halls. So today in particular, I was a bit anxious about whether I was going to be able to get back before the hotel locked the front door. So there's that anxiety going on. So my concentration really wasn't where it should have been later in the day. But we move on to the second uh, performance of the day. This was in the Old Fruit Market, and it was a duo between Koichi Makigami, who uses voice and theremin, and Roger Turner, who's a percussionist, and they got off to a flying start with pattering rhythms and Koichi Makigami's strong, flexible voice using a very impressive range of techniques and switching very easily between them, and each musician complemented the other very well. And it wasn't always possible, and this is something that I quite often say about different instruments, different performers. But it wasn't always possible when the theremin was in play to clearly separate Yoichi's voice from his instrument. He also essayed some great woodwind and jaw harp playing, with the jaw harp in particular. It was there was also singing and speech and other vocal sounds involved within that. Roger Turner's percussion, of course, was also excellent and flexible. Um, and together the duo travelled through shifting densities and volumes and tempos of sound, and there was a whole range of sonic possibilities presented, and hinted at all the kind of sense of possibility that was opened up in your mind within that. So another definite highlight of the day. So the day was off to a flying start, or possibly my attention was much more focused, and then uh, unfortunately fell off. So we were next in the Grand Hall with Jaron Deutsch, with a couple of electric guitar pieces. So the first of those was by Andreas Doman, called FPP1. for electric guitar, and this opened with high-pitched metallic skitterings, electronic noises, bird song, radio static, aquatic sounds, all um, generated from the guitar, from the strings and the amplification, and possibly some of the effects pedals, um, all drawn from the guitar, but all coherent. And the composition strung them together in a way that made sense. There was a long section in the middle where nothing much happened, and I'm sorry to say, I kind of checked out. That then segued into a more conventionally musical section that nonetheless was more compelling than what preceded it. Um, and at the time, I hadn't marked this performance as a highlight, but I'm doing so with a slight asterisk, given that my attention did fade and that I didn't judge it as a highlight immediately. So the second piece that Jaron Deutsch played was Skorgo Y for electric guitar. Both of these pieces, by the way, UK premieres. Um, Skorgo Y, composed by Pierluigi Belloni, uh, and that began at the more bass end of the guitar's sonics. Um, I think there may have been some uh, effects or something helping push the sound a bit more bass than it might otherwise have been. But I don't know. I'm not a technical person. I'm definitely not a guitar person, and I'm not ever focused on what people have and are using. There was some real dexterity required in this, very much like Maria Rezai's piece on the previous day, in a slightly different way. Most of that dexterity in the left hand on the neck of the guitar. Um, but by the same token, there were some passages where nothing much happened or nothing seemed to happen, but things did. I'm not saying there was sort of silence or things were treading water. What happened was sounds decayed, or there was a buzzing that rose and fell. It felt to me, rightly or wrongly, as if there was more of a melody in this piece, but stretched out over a longer time frame than you might expect. And in any case, it held my attention better than FPP1, which, since I'd already kind of just retroactively decided was a highlight, clearly this has to be as well. So that was in the Grand Hall. We were then back down to the old fruit market for Carl Baird, who was, if I can quickly flip over the program, performing an extended solo version of their new release Bearings soundtracks for the Bardos. And um, so let me find my place in the notebook. Now, I have seen Carbad perform previously. I couldn't tell you where. Might have been previous Tectonics. Might have been the one Tusk Festival that I got to in 2019, I think. Or probably Colour Out of Space a few years back. Um, this was a physical as well as a sound performance. There was electronics, voice, flute. Now, both voice and flute were processed in that the mic um, sort of fed into some electronics where sounds were manipulated, so they were slightly transformed and extended. So when the mic was shaken, when it was struck, when it was blown on, sung into, had the flute played at it, those sounds sort of hadn't had kind of an effect and were extended out. Now, overall, this piece didn't work for me, but as I've said already, I was possibly getting a bit tired by this point, and and anxious. Um, like I say, while it didn't work for me, it was good. This was not a bad piece of work at all. Um, there was ambition. There was certainly something being tried, something being done, something aimed for, and perversely, I think compared to this performance, I will probably enjoy this much more on record. Um, and here I should say that all of these performances will be on Radio 3 and I think on BBC Sounds within the next couple of weeks. So go listen to these things for yourself on the radio, or follow up, check out these artists for yourself, make up your own mind. Um, don't follow my opinion. I'm a dumb guy. I don't know anything about music. Uh, my opinion is not worth uh, the paper I've scrawled it on almost illegibly. So from the Old Fruit Market, we were up to the Grand Hall and a feeling of melancholy because these were the last performances. I always love coming to Tectonics. It's always great. I love Glasgow. I think Tectonics is great. I like the range of music, and it's wonderful to get away from your everyday life for a few days and immerse yourself in this world. It would be wonderful if it could be extended for more of the year, for the whole of the year. That would be amazing. It's not possible. Um, so, I have this escape. But let's get on with these final set of reviews. So this was BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra with 4 new compositions. 2 of them UK premieres and 2 of them world premieres. So we opened with Jack Sheen's Lag. This was a BBC commission and a world premiere, and it started with a cloudy, diffuse bed of quiet orchestral sound from which stray notes, fragments of melody would emerge and subside again. There's a constant hum remaining underneath throughout, and it felt like a piece that required your attention. And while it wasn't quite a highlight for me, nor did it ever risk lulling me to sleep or irritating me. And like I said, I am a dumb guy. So, really, all 4 of these pieces in the last section, I was very much aware of my own limitations. I'm listening to them. I'm impressed with what's being produced, even if I'm not always on board. But I don't necessarily understand them. I have no concept of what is uh, sort of smart or engaging about them to someone who is actually knowledgeable. The second piece, um, Carola Barkholt's Im Auge des Klangs, which I believe is in the eye of the sound, as it says here in the programme. And I will come back to the programme for this in a moment after my comments. This was a UK premiere. And at first, to me, this seemed to be about irresolution, both in the sense of not knowing how to start something, so being irresolute, having a notepad or whatever in front of you, and making notes, scratching them out, making notes, scratching them out, but also in the sense of not knowing how to resolve any part of something once started. So you have a good start, you have something that is going on, and then you don't know whether to carry on with it or to draw it to a close or how to go about that. There were at times some superficial similarities to Jack Sheen's piece, the prior piece, in the sense that sometimes you would have this sort of cloudy bed of sound underneath, other things that were happening. But more often here, there were what felt like familiar motifs, like the piece was in dialogue with the repertoire in general, or as the program suggests, and this is where it comes back, a single piece. So that single piece, as described in the uh, program, says starting point for Karol Bauchholt's piece was the first bar of Mussorgsky's with the dead in the dead language. I couldn't tell you what that is. It's probably something I've heard. I can't associate the name with anything that I know. And a central aspect of Karol's work is a fascination with the phenomenon of perception and understanding of music. Noting that just as complex connections can be built up from words in a story, this is also possible in music. If I were more knowledgeable, if I wasn't such a dumb guy, maybe that would mean more to me. But moving on, there was an interval, and then the final two pieces, beginning with Charles Uzor's Breaking of the Vessels for Orchestra and Tape, which opened with looped phrases from the orchestra, which moved from section to section. Now, what I mean by looped is I don't mean they were fed into a loop pedal or they were looped on tape. They were played. I'm calling them looped because they were very short phrases and they were repeated, and they would start with, say, the strings, then move to the brass, then move to xylophone or similar instruments, sort of tuned percussion type things. The music itself was often tense. There was always something happening, some sound, a kind of ground going on under all of the other sounds. So again, similar to the two previous pieces, there was, before I get to the last of these pieces, there was, in a sense, kind of a trajectory to these four pieces, in that they started out restrained and got kind of less restrained progressively until finally we hit this release with the last piece composed by Mirela Ivicevic, called Ubalala, Song of a Million Paths for Violin and Orchestra. And there was a kind of solo violins part, which was played by Ilya Gringolds, returning from yesterday. This was another piece with a lot of tension, but here there was also agitation with that tension, which wasn't present in the previous piece. And that tension and agitation were regularly bursting into explosive life. And at this point, I lost my mind and I come up with this metaphor, and it was almost like the music was scoring its own imaginary film, and there was a protagonist or antagonist, and be aware that protagonist and antagonist are not synonyms for hero and villain, not at all. But it was like one of these characters was having an internal a conflict with themselves over decisions and actions they'd taken. So it was like an internal discussion, just to repeat myself. And that was Tectonics 2024, Tectonics Glasgow, over for another year. So it only remains to recap the highlights. So on day one, it was Eiko Yamada, Elaine Michner, the Mark Yates and Salvatore Schiarino compositions, and the piece composed by Mariam Rezai and Matthew Shlomowitz. So most of my highlights were on day one. And then on day two, it was Brian Irvine and the Imaginary Orchestra. It was Koichi Makigami and Roger Turner, and also retroactively Jaron Deutsch and the guitar pieces that he was playing. And so overall, sort of highlights of the festival, I would have to pull out Eiko Yamada, Mark Yates composition, and Koichi Makigami and Roger Turner. And that is another fantastic Tectonics Glasgow done for yet another year. I'm really fantastically grateful that this is organised by Ilan Volkov and Alistair Campbell, who are the curators of it. They've given me a great amount of joy over the years. I've seen some fantastic performances every year that I've been, and if it's back again next year, then assuming that I can afford it, so will I be. Have a fantastic bank holiday Monday, and I will see you soon. All right, take care. Bye.